I live in a small village in the very north of Scotland, so large shops and resources are a far distance. For that reason, I usually rely on internet shopping to get all my needs. This time, I needed to buy a backpack for when I would leave for university. I needed one better than the one that I already had. So I turned to Craigslist, as I normally do. After looking for a short while, I came across a really good looking bag at only £15. I thought this was an absolute steal, so I phoned the seller. Immediately, what struck me was this guy's accent. It was obvious that he wasn't Scottish or even from the UK. He sounded Polish or something. I'm really not sure. He said he was from Glasgow. That's at least 5 hours by car from where I live. But when I told him the area I was from, he reluctantly offered to come to my house to bring me the bag. This all seemed strange, being that the sale was for only £15. Nonetheless, I foolishly gave him my address. He said he'd drop by later on that day. Skipping forward about 7 hours to about 10 p.m., I was thinking that he wasn't going to come, but at around 10:20, there was a tap at the door. Surprised that it was so late, I looked at the window around the front door, just to be sure, and sure enough, it was a young guy standing with a backpack in his hand. Slightly relieved that it wasn't a robber, I went to the door and opened up. It was the guy on the phone for sure. The accent confirmed it. He said, "Hey, here it is." I smiled and took out my wallet, taking out £30 because of the trouble he went to bring it here and the condition of the bag. He smiled and opened his arms as if he wanted a hug. Being a gay guy, I rarely turned down a hug and just assumed it was a cultural thing, so I hugged him and he left. I was still confused that he had come all this way for just £15, but I didn't find it overly strange. At around midnight, I was finishing another episode of 24 and was ready to go to bed. From outside the house, I heard a car door shut, which was really weird for this time of the night and in my area. I paused the TV and went over to the window to see who it was. I recognized the car as being the green sedan that the guy had had, but he wasn't there. No one was. I was at the point when I heard the back gate opening that I nearly shit myself. I ran quietly to the kitchen where the back door was. I usually don't lock both doors till I go to bed, so both were still unlocked. I grabbed the keys from the counter and quickly locked the door. As I did, I got a fright at the security light turning on in the back garden. It was motion sensor that turned it on. I looked up to see that it was him again. He had a creepy smile on his face, no teeth showing, just a smile. I stood up and shouted, "Whoa, dude, what are you doing back there?" He said nothing and just smiled, looking directly at me. I found myself just staring at him until the situation actually kicked in and I took the keys from the back door, then bolted to the front door to lock it. About halfway to the front door, I heard a window smash in the kitchen. My stomach turned at the fact that he was probably making his way into my house. I made a turn to go up the stairs towards the toilet so I could lock myself in there. When in the bathroom, I heard him stumbling and broken glass falling to the floor. He was in my house. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and quickly dialed 999, told them of the situation as fast as I possibly could, and they said that they would get officers out to me as fast as possible. The police station was just up from my village, so I knew someone would get there generally quick. The operator asked me to stay on the phone until someone arrived. I was focused on the guy's footsteps, which would slow down and speed up every so often. He eventually walked up the stairs and tried to open the bathroom door. When he realized it was locked, he said, "Ah, I know you're in there, Cameron." Hearing him say my name made my stomach churn. I screamed, "The police are coming. Just back off, man." After saying that, he started to kick the door. I backed up against it with more strength than I knew I had. Then, finally, in the distance, I heard the sirens and the blue lights reflecting from the bathroom windows. He continued to kick the door, but then I heard the car doors outside open and fast footsteps. I heard the front door open, and then, "Police officer with a taser, drop the knife." Again, I felt sick knowing that he had a knife. It sounded as if he started running back downstairs. Then I heard, "Taser, taser, taser," and the guy screaming. Then a thump. After a while, they officially arrested him for attempted murder and trespassing. I have pressed charges, but the fact is, he won't get any more than 7 months in jail. After that, he will be free to come right back. I am now trying to sell my house to get out of here as fast as possible. Sometime after getting my job at Walmart in 2008, I was looking for ways to make some extra money, so I began to list some things on Craigslist to sell. I listed my first generation iPhone for sale and received quite a bit of calls about it. One girl even offered me a little more than I asked for it. If I would meet her that day to sell it to her. Being that I was looking to make extra money, I agreed. We spoke on the phone and then agreed on a time and a place to meet. Fast forward a few hours later, at about 7 p.m., still daylight, I went to the place she told me she wanted to meet at. We agreed to meet at a public place with lots of people, and I honestly had no idea about the area where I was. I started to feel a little off about this transaction, and it was a few cities over from where I lived. Initially, I had refused, but I just kept thinking that I could really use the extra money at that point. I stupidly let her choose a place because, talking to her, I got the vibe that she was a good person. I used the term as loosely as it could be, so I trusted her judgment, believing that another woman could not do anything to me. She called me after I had waited for her for about 25 minutes and told me that her car had broke down a few blocks away, but she was still completely interested in buying my phone. I asked her for the directions and drove to meet her. By the time I had made it to where she told me she was, it had gotten dark. Naturally, I felt worried about meeting her, but again, I was desperate for extra cash at that point. I sat there in my car with the windows rolled up, looking for a broken down car, and there was none in sight. I got scared and eventually decided that I should leave. But then, up walks this tall, skinny, tanned girl and a short, stocky girl. "Hey, are you Hannah?" I said, "Yes. Hey, Bibby." She says, "Yes, this is my friend Margot. Can I see the phone?" I said, "Sure," and I took the phone out to show it to her and tell her that it worked great and that I was only selling it because of an emergency. All of a sudden, someone hits me in the face. I was disoriented for a moment and confused to what had happened. Then I saw both of them running away with my phone. I was pissed to the highest level of pissivity, but not because they stole the phone, but because she had hit me. To give you a background about me, I'm a former kickboxer and I'm a pretty thick girl. So I decided to run after both of them, and I eventually ended up catching the thicker girl, Margot. I grabbed her by her hair and rammed her head into my knee and proceeded to beat her. Bibby eventually came back as I was on top of Margot trying to pull me off. But being that I was kickboxing heavily at this time, I was able to keep Margot beneath me by kicking her under her arms and ribs with my knees to keep her down. Bibby started to hit me with the weakest punches ever. Blood was literally everywhere. Margot's face was nearly unrecognizable when I was done with her. She had already dropped my phone, but I was highly pissed because she had hit me. I got up off of her, and they started to run off, basically with their tails in their ass. I had gotten my phone back, along with a headache from the punch. I called the police in order to report what had happened, and found that it was actually a rock she had hit me with. A 10-pound rock, to be exact. I went to the emergency room to treat my wound, but nothing has become of it to this day. After that, I ended up getting robbed at gunpoint for my iPhone on Craigslist too. You would think that after the first incident, I would be done with Craigslist. But what can I say? I just hoped it wouldn't be as bad as the first. Obviously, I was wrong. Not too long ago, I put up a post on Craigslist asking to either sell or trade my fish tank for a smaller one. I put in my phone number as the contact source and asked for texts only. After a couple of hours, I got a text from someone who was willing to trade. We agreed to meet at Walmart in a couple of days when we were both free and to do our trade. During those days, the guy kept on texting me, involving in small talk. He asked me about my name and where I worked, etc., and me being foolish, I answered his questions. I use Craigslist often, and I had never really had a bad experience with anyone, so I never really thought this guy was that weird. I saw him more as friendly. I told this guy what car I drove and what college I went to, and again, I never really stopped thinking what kind of info I was giving to a total stranger. When the day came to meet this guy, he told me that he could only meet me after 10 p.m. I thought that was odd, but agreed to meet him anyway, since my poor fish were already stuck in a 5-gallon jug. So me and my boyfriend drove to the Walmart at about 10:15 and got there in 20 minutes. The guy texted me and said he was already there in an old yellow Camaro. I replied saying, "We're here too, in a gray car." He then texted me and said, "Who is we?" At that moment, I realized something was really off with this guy, and I replied by saying, "My husband and me." That was a lie, of course, but I felt that he should know that I wasn't alone. He never responded after that text. My boyfriend and I went around the parking lot a couple of times, looking for the yellow Camaro, but we never found it. I tried calling the guy, but he ignored my calls. We decided that it was best to just leave. I don't know what would have happened if I had met this creep by myself, or even with my boyfriend there, but I have a feeling it would have not been something good. I removed the post from Craigslist that night, and saved the creep's phone number just in case he tried to contact me again. A couple of weeks later, I got a text from several different phone numbers asking about the tank. I never responded to anyone because I believe it was the same guy, since I for sure deleted the post immediately. I hope he can't somehow track my phone, and of course, I'm not ever going to use Craigslist again. This story took place in 2006, shortly after I had moved into an apartment with a roommate I had met on Craigslist. Both of us males. I was 19 and he was 23, just for context. The apartment was in a fairly nice area of LA, and the neighborhood was mostly inhabited by elderly people of Russian descent. I encountered a lot of strange things within my short-lived 6 months of residing there. One time, we had a robber on the run from the cops who tried to use our roof as a hideout. Another time, a crazy old lady walked right into our apartment, parked herself on the couch, and then refused to leave. My alarm clock was a homeless schizophrenic man who would stand outside below my second-story window at 8 a.m. every day, on the dot, and scream bloody murder for anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes. No words, just full-on screams. And I'm also quite certain that my psychology major roommate was a sociopath. I ran into his boyfriend, sweetest guy ever, a few years ago after moving out and was informed that my ex-roommate tried to run him over and their dog with his car. But I digress. This story isn't even about the crazy roommate, but rather the strange neighbors who lived downstairs. I would see them in passing every now and then, a male and a female, both Russian. The male appeared to be in his 20s and the female in her 50s. I assumed they were mother and son until seeing them holding hands and being affectionate, so I was then able to gather that they were actually in a relationship. Most of the times I saw them, they would always be lugging gigantic pieces of wood into their apartments. Sometimes it was just large pieces of plywood, and other times it would be wooden furniture such as expensive dinner tables and the like. My roommate and I were growing incredibly annoyed at the amount of loud noises that this couple was constantly making below us. We heard the sounds of hammers and power drills at all hours of the day, and what sounded like large groups of people conversing and shuffling around. I thought that maybe they were remodeling their apartment, and so I just hoped that it would be over soon enough. I had seen some other people going in and out of their apartment once in a while, and came to the conclusion that they must have been part of the remodeling team. In retrospect, I don't know why I never called the landlord about it. I was new to apartment life, and I guess I just didn't want to deal with them shooting evil glances my way if they were to ever find out I was the one who complained. Plus, I think I figured one of our neighbors would complain instead, saving me the trouble. One early evening, things had been relatively quiet for a change, so of course, I was taking the opportunity to finally enjoy a little peace and quiet by curling up in bed with a good book. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, I hear a man outside shouting from the top of his lungs, "She's got a knife! She's got a knife! She's trying to kill me!" I immediately jumped out of bed and hightailed it to the front door so I could take a peek outside and see what all the fuss was about. In doing so, I saw the 20-something Russian man booking it out of his apartment below, running full speed ahead. He ran out into the streets, continuing to scream for help until he was completely out of sight. The cop showed up a few minutes later to investigate and arrested the older Russian woman. I casually made my way downstairs to get a closer look at the action and chatted up other equally curious neighbors who were trying to find out what was going on. The cops were standing around, along with about 8 or 10 other people, both inside and outside of the apartment. The door to their apartment was wide open, and from a distance I was able to see that their living room had been transformed into a giant wooden cubby. This is a bit hard to describe, so bear with me. You know in grade school how you would put your backpack and other supplies into a cubby hole for storage purposes? It's like a big shelf with a bunch of square blocks in it. You could also say it resembles those compartmental bookshelves you can get from most furniture stores. Imagine that, except the whole room was taken over by this monstrous wooden cubby space, with each cubby running lengthwise like a rectangle large enough to fit a person inside. Kind of like the shelves that hold all of the dead bodies at a morgue. Of course, the cops weren't willing to offer up any information to all of the nosy neighbors standing around. But I had a pretty good relationship with my landlord, and was able to get some more info out of her a few weeks later. She was extremely hesitant to say anything. It was like pulling teeth, but then she finally gave in because I basically wouldn't let up. It turned out that this couple had been collecting large pieces of wood as a means of building large cubby spaces throughout their 2-bedroom apartment, and were using it to house illegal immigrants in their apartment in exchange for their collective rent money. The cubby spaces were being used as beds for the immigrants to sleep in. Apparently, the strange Russian couple had gotten into a fight the night everything went down, and the man had threatened to expose their scheme, Why? I have no idea, given that he was involved in it too. So in retaliation, she grabbed a knife and was presumably going to shut him up by stabbing him to death, but he managed to escape before she could actually do the deed. Needless to say, with everything that had taken place in such a short amount of time, I got the hell out of that apartment ASAP. I wound up living on my friend's couch for a couple of months until I could find my own place. Unfortunately, my new apartment also turned out to be a total nightmare, but that's another story for another day. A couple of years ago, I had found a job on Craigslist, working at a modeling agency, working as a scout. The boss was clearly into me from day one, and after a few times working there, he gave me his number. He started to tell me that he loved me, that it was love at first sight. He told me that I changed his life after meeting him once. At the time, I was living at home with my parents, in between my ex's house and my now apartment. And one day, when I was getting the train, he turned up with a dozen roses and took the train with me. Looking back, I don't believe I ever told him what train I took. This should have set alarm bells ringing, I know, but at the time, I was at a low point, and the attention was flattering. Other creepy things he did included sending me unsolicited pictures of him in the bathtub, and taking me to sex shops, saying that that's where I would find the models. He wasn't even my type. He looked kinda thuggish and had a tattoo on his back, huge angel wings with the number 13 in the middle. After the train incident, I decided to look him up online and saw his mugshot. He had been in jail, but not for anything violent, but just for a felony for stealing money from the club he used to manage. Nevertheless, I was creeped out. I confronted him, and he gave me an explanation, and I believed him that it was a once-off mistake and that he wasn't a bad guy. Shortly after, one night, he came over to my parents' house when they weren't home. He knew they were away. I believed we were just hanging out, but in hindsight, he was checking the place out. He left the same night after a few hours. The next day, I went into work, and my boss had not arrived yet. I got a phone call from the security alarm company saying someone had broken into my family's home and that they detected movement throughout the house, including my area of the house. Nothing was ever stolen or anything I noticed, but I just knew he had broken in. I guess the alarm had maybe frightened him off. After that, I quit my job shortly after. He ended up being escorted out of the workplace. Apparently, he had stolen money from the company too, and I heard he was in jail again now. I had actually forgotten about him until recently because my parents had since sold the house, but I was afraid for a long time that he would come back. Luckily, I haven't seen him since, and I sure am glad I decided not to date him. Hey guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. For a long time I had been reluctant to do a Craigslist video, since I kind of felt that many other people had already done it. I hope you guys found these stories to be new, and if you didn't, I'm sorry, I tried to find the most original ones I could. Anyway, thank you guys all so much for the support, and please like, comment, share, and subscribe if you're new. Also follow me on Twitter. If you guys want to check out a great channel on Twitch that live streams games like DayZ, Battlefield, and many more, I really recommend watching Handkerchief. So check out his channel by clicking on his logo or the link in the description, and be sure to follow him. Let me know what you guys want to see in the upcoming videos by commenting down below, and if you have any stories of your own to submit, please feel free to send them to wormystories@gmail.com. I'll see you guys in the next video. And don't forget to subscribe to join the wormhole. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.